Welcome to the Shōgun podcast. We are the Lorehounds, your guides to the political intrigues of feudal Japan. I'm David.
And I'm John Blackthorne. And this is our coverage of episodes 1 and 2
Well played.
of the FX limited series Shōgun, now streaming on Hulu.
For these first two episodes, we're not going to do a scene-by-scene breakdown since we've got 2 episodes to cover and you guys don't want to be here for 4 hours. So instead, we're going to go with a spoiler-free hot takes. And then we're going to do a little break, and then we'll come back, and then we'll get into a wider-ranging discussion that includes some history and lore, production notes, discussions of main characters, plot and story elements, and then we'll wrap up with our favorite scenes from the 2 episodes.
We have set up an email, so if you have questions or feedback, send those to shogun@thelorehounds.com or head to the contact page on our website, thelorehounds.com, and use the form or record us a voicemail that we can drop right into the podcast. I know we've got a couple tonight, so
we've got 2. We have 2. Also join us on our Discord. We've got a fun and active community and a great mod team and special channels that we've set up just for Shōgun.
If you're interested in supporting the Lorehounds community, check us out on Patreon or subscribe using our new Supercast platform. Supercast is just like Patreon, but built for podcasters. But subscribers on either platform will get a community-built online character guide. Do we have a name for it yet, David?
No, I think we're just still calling it the season guide. Any of the really creative...
What about the rudder?
Oh, the rudder. That could be interesting.
It's the rudder.
That could be. I think we have 3 names now. I can't remember the other 2. And I was just worried because it's like, it sounded too, like it doesn't explain it. Like if you land on it, you know what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. So,
right.
Yeah, but a rudder's good. That's good. Cause we're going to talk about rudders in a little bit.
Right.
So, but a special shout out to Aaron and Brian, Aaron K and Brian 8063, who've really jumped in on this and have been scraping up information and putting it in. The use case for this thing is basically, if you're watching the show and you've got your phone, you can be on the character guide and scrolling through, and you can see the faces and the names of the characters and just a quick 2 or 3 words about who they are. And then that way, just to help you remember, because this is like a cast of thousands kind of thing. And then we're going a little bit deeper with that. But great job, Aaron and Brian. And we've set up another little special thread in the Patreon section of the Discord, where if you have material that you want to send us or things that you want to add, we can take that in now and have it really community driven. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun.
It is very cool. And we were talking today, we're like, ooh, Rings of Power. This could be a very interesting tool as well for that.
I know.
And you were thinking that before, I think.
Yeah, I mentioned that. I haven't started yet. I've just had too many things going on, and we don't even have a date yet.
Aaron K put up a cool Venn diagram overlapping thing, but the difference between a Shōgun and a Taiko. And I was like, oh, this is just like John's flow chart for the elves. Yeah. But we never really had a good place to put that last year.
I know.
And now
it was on a weird Google Drive link.
Yes, exactly. I mean, who's going to look at it? Anyway, we've got more information about supporting our community, as well as notes about our upcoming schedule. We'll have all of that at the end of the podcast.
Cool. Hot take time.
Yes.
Get your hot takes.
Hot takes here. Spoiler free. So if you haven't seen...
Oh, we are? Oh, shoot.
Yeah, we should.
I was not prepared for this.
Just for the first 2 episodes. And
Fair
then
enough.
Next week we'll go into spoiler free, because everybody's still catching up and like, should I watch the show? Is this something that I'm interested in?
Yeah.
I think the short answer is yes. There was somebody on our Discord who even said, I came here to find out if I should watch the show. I got my answer.
Yep.
It was a perfect encapsulation of the conversation that's going on with the show. I've not heard a bad word about it yet.
I just want to say about this show before I even go into my impressions.
Pukila
plus a lot. Marilyn, if you're listening.
I don't think so. I disagree.
Then don't watch this show.
Even if there's disagreement, don't watch the show. That's telling enough.
Yeah. Similar. If you have similar taste to Marilyn in terms of violence, I would not recommend this show. It is not for the faint of heart, the first episode. You had told me, David, that the second episode is much less violent. I agree with that. The first one I felt was a bit gratuitous, and we can get into it when we get into details. But The second episode I thought had a very tasteful balance.
Mm-hmm.
So I am hoping that continues through the show. Overall, though, I'm really loving the show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really into it. I got to tell you, so on our season preview, I told you I got the book. I haven't
Yes.
cracked it open yet. I'm not sure I'm really going to go into it because of time.
How far
And
have you gotten?
I had to take a.
Are you halfway through?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not even close. But I had to take a 3-hour train ride, and I read it like the whole way because I was just like
engrossed.
I can't get away from this. It's really,
Amazing.
really good. And so I was so looking forward to this premiere. And honestly, it delivered. I thought that the changes were all really smart. They all just like condensed things and eliminated things that were unnecessary to the core of the story. Just like, a character will not be in the story any longer sooner because it doesn't matter the little short bits that they had with our protagonist later. Things like that. I thought that they really captured a lot of the details in the show. And, there's something where like in a book, you can have an aside where you're like, a koku is blank. Whereas it's really hard to do that in a TV show. I thought the TV show did an excellent job doing a show not tell exposition.
Okay.
I thought that mostly we were being shown how the society worked. There were a few times where it was explained, but when it was explained, it made sense, right? It was, this is a character who's brand new to this world. And this character is being explained to by someone else who has been initiated into this world, but is from the character's world.
And it's relevant for that exchange to happen.
Right.
Naturally, right. It would be a naturally occurring thing in the moment.
Right. And that's hard to do right. And I think they did a really, really good job of that.
Right.
It feels really authentic. Even, the hairstyles, the costuming, amazing. The scenery is amazing. I'm really glad they filmed primarily in Japan because you can tell it really feels real. And it feels lived in, right? Like these villages feel like they are, and these cities, Osaka, feels like it's a place where people live, and it feels like it's a place that functions without the main character walking into it, which is very cool. I think it's very, very Game of Thronesy in terms of the politics. It's very like they did a great job of, we talk about the character motivations have to be the lead, not the plot motivations. And here I feel like every character has motivations that I understand.
Right.
And I really like that. I really like how these different things are interacting. Even characters who I don't know where they're going to go next, I'm like, I can see all the different factors going into the characters that make them unpredictable. And that's really exciting to me. Right. That's really making me want to press forward to the next episode. And I can't wait for episode 3. My one criticism is I hate John Blackthorne's Jon Snow shtick. John Blackthorne.
You're reading it like Jon Snow. That's interesting.
I'm Jon Snow. I'm John Blackthorne. Oh, I hate the Portuguese. That's his whole shtick.
Right. Interesting. Okay, I got it.
I hate the shtick, but honestly, everyone else makes up for it.
Yes.
I just wish I didn't hate the main character's shtick, and it's funny because I like the main character. Like I like what he says. I like how he carries himself. I hate the voice.
Okay, fair enough.
I hate it. It makes me cringe.
That's hilarious. All right. Well, and you're working on your imitation, so you can make fun of it by mocking it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. See, I can make fun of a British accent. I'm not doing any other accents. We're not going near that. But anyway, what you think of the show?
Well, I just wanted to quickly expand on this thought of this comparison between Martin and Clavel here. And we got to remember Clavel did this first. So Martin is standing on Clavel's shoulders. And I don't know if Martin has read Clavel or not. That being this huge historical, deeply researched novel, inside of that tradition, one of the reasons why Martin is successful is because he looked to history, to our human history in the primary world. And he looked at motivations and power struggles and all of these kinds of things. And he was able to bring that into a fantasy story. Where Clavel is doing historical fiction, he's doing a similar thing where he's doing deep research and deep character study and then wrapping it in this really good story. And so it works, right? It's a model that works. And when it's done well, it is exquisite. And it sings because it presents itself as real to us. We can understand these characters' motivations because we can see real human motivations in them, right? It's not a goofy made up thing. So,
and it's so easy to have the human heart in conflict with itself when you have three hearts. It's crazy.
I didn't even think of that. We're going
It's like
from a cube. We're going from a squared to a cubed.
I felt like he jumped
here.
behind me at that point and went, the human heart in conflict with itself. I was like, oh, it was a jump scare.
We need to update that graphic that who is it, Davey Mack put in the Discord about the button pushing.
Yeah.
So we need a third button on there. So hats off to FX because they have gone all in. They have pushed all their chips into the middle of the table here. The marketing is everywhere. The online resources are great. The website looks great. Their character guides and supporting material is awesome. They flooded YouTube with a lot of cool resources to prep and educate and hype us up. The production values on this are over the top, and we're going to talk about one of the language things and how the scripts are developed later on. I was listening to the official podcast, and a shout out to the official podcast. They're about half an hour episodes, but they're really well produced and packed with really good information. It's almost like a Lorehounds podcast, actually, except ours are 3 hours long instead of 30 minutes. The fact that they even hired a movement master to coach people how to move properly in the traditional costumes and in a courtly setting.
Oh, that's cool.
That's a crazy amount of budget that they're throwing at this thing. The casting, I think, is spot on. I really had my doubts about Jarvis, and he's pulling it off. John Blackthorne.
Jarvis.
I was really nervous that he wasn't going to be able to do it, and I think he's doing it. I think he's doing a really good job. And he has to, for viewers like me, he has to get over the Richard Chamberlain hump of the 1980s version, and that's just going to be there in comparison. And he's doing his own thing, and it's great, and it's working for me. I thought, and we were chit-chatting about this earlier about how episode 1 and 2 are in comparison. And for me, episode 1 did a really great job of setting up the world for me, that we're in Japan, there's Jesuits, Dutch, English, shogunate, all of these kinds of things. And then episode 2 really worked for me in terms of setting up the stakes. Here's the power dynamic. Here's the motivations of the primary actors. And then here's the trap and the ticking time bomb that's going to, set things off and set all our characters into motion. But then I think you said you had the opposite reaction, that 2 did the world and 1 did the stakes.
Well, I think that 1 kind of throws you in intentionally and disorients you intentionally.
Just like being on a ship and crashing into
hold on, we're still in spoiler free territory, so
we are well, we've seen that.
I know it's the first scene, but I think 2 lets you see the world in action, and seeing the world in action to me is always a much more effective world building technique.
Got it
And just watching these factions kind of duke it out in political intrigue and just dialogue and just undercover moves towards each other, I'm like, okay, I get what's going on now. I feel like I'm with it now.
Right.
Yeah, so glad that they did a double drop. At first I was like,
exactly,
this is too much. It's 2 episodes. It's 2 hours. But now I'm like, oh, no, I think it's good. I think it's good that they did a double drop.
I did my second watch last night, and my wife joined me, and she really liked it. And she was starting to ask me a bunch of questions in episode 2. And I said, wait, watch the episode, and by the end of episode 2, you will have all of your questions answered. All of the little things that they've set up, they resolve them so you understand when they reference this other city, or when they talk about this thing or that thing. It's explained ultimately in the episode. And so I thought that's a really good job. They've done a really good job. I also like the sprinkling of humor that they have in throughout. Yeah. There's a lot of little things. There's one scene, which is not really a spoiler, but the main character Blackthorne is trying to, go to sleep on a Japanese style bed. And he's like moving the pillow around and he's trying to get comfortable.
Yeah.
Really great little, very human moment, but very funny. And it provides a little bit of levity in what sometimes can be a very heavy or serious.
Yeah. I mean, there's stuff like that in the book too. Like I'm about 150 50 pages in right now.
Uh-huh.
And which, by the way, the show's already past where I am. Like, it's
Right.
moving really fast, really
Nice.
fast. But so I don't know any spoilers beyond this. So if I speculate, it's genuine speculation. But anyway,
Sure.
there's a line in the book where they're like, "There's no chairs here, not a chair on the continent." Like, it's
perfect. Exactly. Right.
Kills me.
And yeah. So I was thinking that this was sort of maybe a +1 or +2 on the Pukila scale, because the violence is not all over the place. And there's, we'll talk about it because later.
But the violence is so severe at certain points that I think it has to be higher than that.
Gosh,
it has to be higher than that.
I
because
think
you put that one scene in front of Marilyn, she'll never watch the show again.
But we can, yeah, and then they just go. Then it's gone and it's done, and it's we're gonna have to wait.
Promise me though that in the next 8 episodes we're not returning to that.
No,
violence.
we're gonna. I think we're gonna have the fight kind of violence. Like we had a couple of fight scenes in episode 2 that were very just like, oh, this is like watching standard American television these days, right? It wasn't that.
Yeah. I will say though, I think that
we've got a whole section to talk about.
What this show will probably do, I'm expecting, is go into the very realistic brutality of the samurai fighting style, right? Because a lot of people think like, oh, samurai honor, clean kill. There's no pain involved. And like, I don't know, some of these guys have intentions that do not compute with suffering or not suffering.
We've got a whole section to talk about depiction of violence later on. So let's definitely keep that for that conversation as well. So anyway, yeah, it'll be interesting. I would love, maybe we should time code the episode so that Marilyn can watch it and then she can tell us where it lands on her scale. I'm going to go out.
Don't watch this, Marilyn. If you're here still, don't watch it.
I think she would enjoy the historicity of it.
She would.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this passes the Shippy test. With just on 2 episodes, this thing passes the Shippy test relative to Shōgun the book to the television show. I've been watching the miniseries, the 1980 miniseries. It's hitting the right beats, but it's doing all the changes that it needs to recenter the story. And I think the miniseries, or this series, the FX series, is bringing in more book direct adaptation stuff.
It's pretty close so far. What I've seen.
Exactly.
I mean, again, I've not read much of the book, but like from what I've seen, it seems like pretty close.
I feel like it's going to pass the Shippy test at the end of this. And I think on the Sanderson slider, I think it's perfectly balanced between inspiration and adaptation so far. I feel like we have a really good balance where they're especially the first part of episode 2, where I think there's stuff that's not in the book or the miniseries. But anyway, we can talk about it later. I'm a little pained because this is a limited series.
But aren't you glad at the same time? Like they're not going to drag this out.
I would no. I'm glad that this story has a discrete trajectory. But then I'm like, man, this world is beautiful. These characters are amazing. This whole setup is amazing. And then Adrian pointed out on the Discord is like, well, aren't there more books? And it's like, oh yeah, there's 6 books here. So I don't know if FX is going to go down that road and go for a, grand epic Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon style.
But how does the series work? Is it anthology? Or is it connecting? Does it follow?
It jumps in time.
Yeah,
it jumps in time. And there's a central line that runs through it that's centered on some key instances, but then I think each book moves forward in a different time. But then you reestablish relationships and characters, but the momentum that you picked up from the previous book carries you through into the second book. So it's not change the lens, but you're being propelled forward through this cohesive story.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, I just think that like it's probably going to be different enough where they have to do new sets, new photography, all that for every series.
Right, because they move in time. Yeah.
And the production, so it's probably like we're not committing to anything beyond this right now.
And this has been in production since pre-pandemic.
That's crazy.
Right?
But I buy that,
Yeah. They've really crafted this thing. So whatever happens the rest of this next year, whoever's going to try and come and challenge Shōgun right now is going to have a hard time knocking this out of my number one spot right now because
you're calling the judgment too fast, man. You gotta cool it.
I'm just saying, if you want to come
Mr.
for the Shōgun.
Issa Lopez's Noah Hawley over here.
Do not miss.
All right,
hey, she's gonna. I think she's gonna go. I have hopes that she's gonna go.
No. Let's replay the tape. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, hold me to it. I've got internet points out on this. Right. This will be in my top 5. We got to see what else is coming this year. But man, this is good stuff.
All right. Good
so
start.
If you haven't seen it, go see it. I got an email from Ron. Actually, Ron was like, "Dude, you were right. The show is fire." And I was like,
good.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Quick break before we get into spoilers.
I think so.
All right. We'll be right back, folks. And we're back. We're going to talk about some history here before we get into the full series. But from this point out, we are talking full spoilers. So if you haven't watched the show or you don't want to be spoiled, then head out, come back. For the rest of you still with us, gather around, for we are going on the Erasmus Blackthorne ship. Would you like to tell us more about it, David?
Yes, I would, in fact. And I would like to also open the invitation. This show has a lot of richness to it. And so if there's things that we're missing or got a little bit wrong, or we may even call out some specific things, that would be great. We want to hear your feedback. So send in an email. If you want to post something on the Discord, tag us specifically. Hey, this is, for consideration. DM us. Send in a voicemail. We got 2 great voicemails today along these lines. So there's a lot of cool, rich information on the season guide. We're starting to put in some Wikipedia articles and some diagrams and some other things. So send in your notes and we can include them there. And of course, then we have the character guide, which is on the same page, but as a separate sort of resource. That said, there's so much that we could talk about in terms of the history of things. And so we're just going to touch on a few things. I got kind of taken with the whole ship that Blackthorne was on, which is called the Erasmus. And Erasmus was a Dutchman who was a Catholic Dutchman, Erasmus of Rotterdam, who died in 1536. He was Catholic, but he was a humanist, and he stayed being a Catholic because he wanted to try to reform the church from the inside. And I believe that a lot of his work, and he was a very prolific writer and translator, that he was one of the thought leaders of the Reformation. I could be a little bit wrong on that, but I believe that's accurate. And the Reformation is in reaction to the way that the Catholic Church was dominating religious space, right? And so that's what we have here as a main tension with Blackthorne is his antipathy towards the Society of Jesus. So I thought it was really interesting that the ship is named the Erasmus, because this is set in 1600 and Erasmus died in 1536. And so all during this time and all this stuff, this person plays a kind of a background role. And I thought that was cool. There is do you know much about Reformation history and process?
I knew at some point a bunch of stuff about the Reformation, and it has left my brain. So feel free to tell me whatever you want to tell me.
Right in. The ship's rudder, which is not to be confused with rudder. So this is R-U-T-T-E-R as opposed to a rudder, which is an R-U-D-D-E-R, which is the thing that helps you steer the ship. That's the thing that Blackthorne is holding on to when they're in the storm. Wait, we're spoiler free here. We can talk spoilers now. Yeah, in the storm. So a ship's rudder is basically just a book that a pilot or a navigator would use to write down all their sailing directions and notations. This was before charts were developed, before we actually had good working maps. So this is kind of a ship's log, but it's also the iPad of the pilot who has to keep tons and tons of geographically related data. They wrote it all down in these books called a rutter. And that word is derived from, I believe, a French word and a Spanish word that were similar. And then that's where the English word came from. So it has nothing to do with the thing that steers the ship.
It's funny. I knew by the time I went into the show, but when I was first reading the book, the first couple times it came up, I was like, why are they so concerned that they're going to find the rudder? It's
Yes,
why is
exactly.
that such a problem?
Yeah. The other, just another small interesting thing that I caught on the opening of the episodes was the ship's lead, the lead line, the thing that he was throwing into the water, which, maybe folks don't know about. The way that you would do to check the depth, because you don't want to run aground on a deep hulled ship like that, you tie a lead weight to a piece of string, and which is called a plummet. And it was usually made of lead, and it had a little hollow scoop out on the bottom, and they would put tallow in there. So when this thing hit the ground, in the water, it like sand and shells and rocks and other kind of stuff like that would stick to it. And then they would tie little flags at the fathom marks. And then they had a whole system of calling out, by the deep 5, the mark 6, whatever. I can't do it all, but they would call out to the back of the ship, so to letting So when Blackthorne throws that thing over the water, over the ship, he's checking the soundings and realizing that when you see that white sand, it means we're near land. So
Right.
Just a cool couple of nautical things that I thought were kind of fun to pick up on. Not consequential in any way, but just sort of fun history. So
You got to stay nautical with it.
yes.
If nautical nonsense be something you wish, then flop on the deck and flop like a fish.
Oh, bravo. Oh, are you going to compose little haikus for us as we go
No,
through the
that was the
season?
SpongeBob SquarePants theme song.
Oh, are you serious? I had no
Yeah.
idea. I'm not a SpongeBob person, so I thought
No,
you
I
just made
wasn't
that
just
up on the
being a
spot. I
poet.
was impressed. I thought
Should
you were
I-
like Omi with a death poem here.
That was in the book too, actually. It's
Okay.
funny because I watched that part of the episode before I read that in the book, and then I was like,
Okay.
oh, it was actually from the book.
Perfect. All right, so we got to talk about the Treaty of Saragossa. And this is a big deal, and we'll probably get into it a little bit more, but it's a big setup plot point for the whole show. And this is a 1529 treaty between Portugal and then sort of what will become Spain. It wasn't called Spain at that point, I believe. And there was a previous treaty between Portugal and Spain that divided the world in the Atlantic, and it's basically gave the Portuguese Africa and the Spanish South America, and the Portuguese, where the line went, it cut through the front, or part of Brazil, which is why in Brazil they speak Portuguese and not Spanish, and this is being very simplified. But when they were over in the other side of the globe, there was some islands that they both were claiming and fighting over for spice. And so then they had to hammer out another treaty, which basically these two lines bisect the world in half. And it says this half belongs to Spain, literally the entire globe. You get this half of the globe, we get the other half. We have some rules around the treaty. It's a little bit soft. We can sort of play with it, but they literally divided the world in half to plunder for themselves. So that is the Treaty of Saragossa. We have a Wikipedia article posted on the show guide for patrons. Otherwise, you can just go to Wiki and Google for it. That said,
that does seem quite consequential to this show.
Hugely.
It's funny you don't think
it's a
about
real thing,
because look, we live in America. We were raised on American history. We have an America-centric view of history, probably. And you think about the Spanish and the English going at it, trying to divvy up America, and the French and whatnot. And that's what we learned about mostly in grade school, is the division of the Americas by Europe. And you don't think a lot about what happened to the rest of the world until later on.
Right, exactly.
And so this is honestly the first time I'm hearing about this really big consequential agreement that affected colonization in the rest of the world.
Yeah. and where things went really badly wrong very early on. And I think we're still unpacking a lot of the trauma
Yeah.
in many
And
places of the
and you
world.
talk about that in American grade school, but
Mhm.
generally you focus on after we sorted our stuff out in
Right.
America, after like the 1800s, you learn a lot about, the African colonization and things like that, but and India and all that.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah. And long before India was the Portuguese in Africa
that's
and
what I mean, though. Is
opium
like
wars,
there's
and
so many
it's
things that
brutal.
you just don't really learn
Yeah.
enough about in
Exactly.
American education.
Exactly. And I don't think we ever learned about the Black Ship, which
No.
was a type of ocean going vessel called a carrack, a carrack. That was like a 3 or 4 masted ship, but it was painted with black pitch. And
Hmm.
so it was referred to by people in Japan. They would say, "Oh, there's that black ship that's doing all the trade and what have you." So they just called it the Black Ship, and then that sort of colloquially became the name. And then this ship would bring guns and ammunition and other sort of trade technologies, and then bring back spice and silk and a lot of other goods that were valuable in Europe. And again, the Portuguese had a lock on the Japans, and no other, and both by, I believe, Japanese um, dictate, saying like, foreigners, you're not allowed here. Only the Portuguese are allowed here. And then we're only going to trade with the Portuguese. And then the Portuguese were like, nobody else can come in. And just like we saw with Blackthorne, they were like, how did you get this rudder? How did you figure out your way through Magellan's Passage? All of these details. This was because Portugal was very jealously guarding this location. And it wasn't just trade with Japan, but it was also with China and then Macau. And
Right.
there's a whole thing about the Portuguese in Macau that I think we need some more research on. I was trying to do a little bit of research before we got on, but there's a lot that we got to do.
It looks pretty complex.
Yeah, so I'd love to learn more about the Macau. So if anybody's got a line on that kind of stuff or wants to go for that, please, read some articles or what have you, and then send us in a voicemail or email, something like that.
Cool.
Yeah. The other thing that we should mention is the Edo versus the Sengoku periods. These are different eras in Japanese history. It's like saying, the old, I'm trying to find an American analogy of like, say, in the West, like before the railroad and then after the railroad kind of thing. It was, it's not a technology based line for the Edo versus the Sengoku, but they're different eras where different things were there were different sensibilities about it and different developments. One of the things that was very interesting that I picked up from the official podcast was that the act of seppuku was very different in the different eras. During Sengoku, it was a very private affair. It was a very subdued affair, which is where I see when we have it here, they close the shoji mats, the blinds, and it's private. Whereas in the Edo period, apparently it was much more of a public spectacle and a big remonstration of, I'm doing this, in a big loud way, as opposed to a more private, subdued way. So that's one of the differences. But I think it's something that, again, I think we need to do some more reading and research about this. So one other thing, this is a strange crossover to Anthony's Bookaloo podcast. I was just listening to a previous episode the other day with one of his medieval experts. They were talking about when a knight would go out onto the battlefield on a horse with a big, with big shiny armor. What that actually did was signal that, hey, that dude's got money and he is worth something. So rather than killing him on the battlefield, let's capture him and ransom him. He's worth something to us. Whereas if you're a feudal lord and you're about to be taken, you might take your own life, or in other cases. So you're basically rendering yourself useless as a hostage, as a male combatant hostage, as opposed to other potential hostages. So and hostage taking was like a really big part of medieval society. Like it was a big deal where I'm going to send my
industry.
son. It was an industry. It was. and your kids go live with somebody else to maintain the peace. You do all these intermarriages and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know that this is a direct thing, but I just thought it was it came to my mind that, and I know there's a lot more cultural connotations around this, but I just thought in this one way that was kind of interesting, that if you remove yourself from the equation, there is no equation. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So you had picked up on something that was pretty interesting that has to do with the fundamental basis of the Japanese economy at this sort of feudal time.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting definition that they gave in the book and for some reason omitted from the show, maybe because it was too explainy. But the koku, which they mention at some point, I think Yabu says to Omi, like, "Oh, I'm increasing your koku."
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the definition in the book verbatim is: a koku of rice was a measure that approximated the amount of rice it took to keep one family alive for 1 year. About 5 bushels, perhaps 350 pounds of rice. All income in the realm was measured by koku, and all taxes.
There you go. Right. So basic unit of measurement, of metrics, of tied to survival, literally.
Yep. But that's super interesting, right? Instead of a coin, it's what do you need to survive?
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right. Production. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. What do you think of how they're handling language in this production so far?
That's a good question, especially with the Portuguese thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about it.
Yes, let's talk about it.
It's an interesting choice to have such a fundamental conflict be between the English and the Portuguese, and then have all Portuguese be English.
A lot of people were confused. They were like, "Wait, what? Wait, is this supposed to be Portuguese?"
They keep referencing them speaking Portuguese, but I haven't heard anything but English and Japanese.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, I think the most obvious answer of why they did this would be, I think it's probably easier to find people who are bilingual in Japanese and English than in Japanese and Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
Or Japanese, Portuguese, and English, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having to handle 3 languages on set might have been a little too tough.
But Jarvis doesn't speak Japanese. The guy who's playing Blackthorne.
Yeah, but he's going to have to.
No, he's learning That's the beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. That's an interesting thing. I picked this up on the second episode of the official podcast. He's learning Japanese in a way that's not dissimilar to the way that Blackthorne would have been learning Japanese. Right. So he's on set with Japanese actors who don't speak English. And he's a English speaking actor who's, having to act and emote, not knowing, in English while somebody else is being translated to, and then having to react to his acting through translation.
So I guess what I would say with that is, sure, he'd have to learn like Blackthorne, but presumably to get this story done in 10 episodes, we're going to start jumping time at some point. And Blackthorne's going to be better at speaking Japanese than Jarvis.
Right. I think that's, if I remember the miniseries, I think that's right, because then we're already seeing him picking up a number of words and spontaneously speaking.
Learning how to say I am a dog and all that.
all that. So I thought, there's the world of dubs, and having mouth movements and speaking in different, not matching. For some people that just weirds them out. They can't handle it. Other people enjoy it. Some people like subtitles. Some people don't. And I think, given the already complex nature of this, I can understand why FX didn't do a Portuguese aspect to this.
Also, have you looked into Portuguese? It's a really hard language.
No, I have not.
When I used to do the chorus stuff, I used to sing in high school and college, and one time I had to do a Portuguese song. None of the words sound like they look on the paper.
Okay.
It's incredibly complicated if you're an English speaker.
Okay.
And so I think that might be part of it. Again, it's just like, all right, Japanese is already a really nuanced language. English has no rules. It's very obnoxious.
Right.
And
really
are we really going to make people learn all, you know what I mean? Like three, I think it's just too much to juggle with all these things going around. At the same time, I wouldn't have minded if they had Portuguese in here. I
Right.
think that would have been cool, but it's something that I'm totally willing to overlook for the sake of we wanted these people to be able to act more freely.
So I think there's impact on casting. I think there's impact on audience viewership. There's the show
Hmm.
Pachinko, which I've talked about a number of times. That's trilingual. That is English, Korean, and Japanese. And if they're speaking in English, they have or they would do well as an English speaker. If I set it to English, then if they were speaking Korean, it would be in English subtitles of one color. But then if they switched to Japanese, then they would switch the color of the subtitles to another color, also in
Hmm.
English. Really interesting way, and I love the fact that they went trilingual. But it took a lot of work from me to pay attention and understand what was going on. And I think
Right.
if we got into dubbing or extra subtitles, I think it would impact viewership. And so I can
Yeah.
understand from that studio standpoint why they went one way.
I think it's fine. I'm
Yeah.
really glad that they didn't have everyone speak English all the time. I think that would have
Yes.
taken away from it.
Exactly.
Because partially because this is supposed to be a character feeling really disoriented in this world, and it'd be
Correct.
really weird for John Blackthorne to be there like, I can't understand what you're saying, and they're all speaking in English, and yeah, it'd be really weird.
It'd be weird. In the original 1980 miniseries, there was no subtitling. So if
Mm,
two Japanese characters were on screen talking, they did not translate it, and you had to do the work to watch their actions to understand,
hmm.
or what was that character coming from, or what did the other character go to understand that conversation.
I don't like that.
It's really innovative for 1980.
I don't like it.
That's very cool, and it was intentionally done to create a sense of disorientation from Blackthorne's point of
I'm
view,
sure that would have worked. I guess here's the other thing: if we're supposed to view this whole series through Blackthorne's eyes,
which we're not now in this series. In this series, we're not.
sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think in general, we're discovering the world in a similar pace to Blackthorne.
Mm-hmm.
And Blackthorne speaks Portuguese. Fine. Have it be a language that we as the viewer understand.
Right. Right. I think it would
Especially
be.
if this is for an American audience, this show.
I could see a cool aspect is if there was a Portuguese audio track that you could turn on. Like if you're really
That's a
diehard
lot of
into
work.
it.
Yeah. They don't have the budget for that. They spent it too much on the hairdos.
Well, you know what they spent it on was the scripts. One of the places they spent their budget on. This is another detail from the official podcast. The writer's room was in English. So they
Mm-hmm.
wrote all the scripts in English. They then sent it off for translation into Japanese in sort of a modern concurrent form of
Mm-hmm.
Japanese. They then took the Japanese translation and sent it to a second Japanese translator to have it translated back for historicity.
Mm.
So basically taking, sending it back to the Shakespearean playwright
Right.
person to translate it into formal Sengoku era courtly Japanese.
So you're telling me that Yorinaga is really using a lot of
Yes.
doth.
Yes,
And thou.
and thous and theys
Yeah, yeah.
and wherefore art thous. And then when they brought it back for the subtitling, they didn't go to the English scripts. They took the formalized Japanese and retranslated it back to English.
Wow.
So that's 1, 2, 3, like 3 or 4 different hops.
Yikes.
That's a lot of budget.
I don't envy that person who had to do that. I don't envy them.
The script wrangler had their work cut out for them. So I think it's pretty exceptional. I think it's really amazing that they went to that length and they cared that much and they spent the budget on doing that. When we are, in a lot of aspects of our modern entertainment industry, the corporations are just trying to shove out fast CGI, based IP green screen stuff, where this is really sweating the details.
Yeah. All right. We have to talk about the visual editing now.
Am I in your head at all on the visual stuff these days?
Sometimes. There's a couple things that I'm like, why are we going to black so often? And like staying there for longer than I think is
Oh, that's
normal.
interesting. I didn't notice the black transitions. I'll have to do that.
We're staying black for like a second or two. which
Wow.
is like an eternity of time in staying black in between scenes.
That I've not noticed that is saying something that it's doing what they intended to do. That I'm getting, it's a palette refresher. It's a,
Oh, for me, I'm like, what are we
what is
doing?
this?
What are
What's
we
going
doing?
on?
Did my Hulu glitch?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it did. Maybe somebody's gonna write in. It's not happening, John.
Yeah, that's just
Yeah.
you. I'm going to have to pay attention to that now, because otherwise this show is wild. It's wild on the editing, man. There are, in one little scene, there might be 5 or 6 cuts where normally you'd get 2 or 3. They're doing 3 to 4 times the amount of work here. And then you'll get these really interesting shots where the character is all the way left on this, on the left side of the frame, but then the right side of the frame is all just negative empty space. But then they'll come back for like a traditional wide, and then they'll come in on a hyper close up, and then they'll do another offset thing, and then they'll reverse the camera on the angle, and then they'll go out to a wide again. And they're just, this camera is moving constantly. And the amount of editing that had to be done on this, it's blowing my mind. It's absolutely over the top.
Yeah, I will say it does seem like everything's moving a lot. Sometimes I'm a little disoriented, but I think that's on purpose.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that after watching it twice, each episode all the way through twice, the second viewing made and then even today I was jumping in and checking a few things. I was like, oh, okay, it's all making sense now. Cause I think we're just in that uptake of learning this new world. So
yeah, I felt really disoriented on episode 1. And again, I watched episode 1 after reading about 100 pages of the book.
right.
So I'm like, what's going on? I still feel disoriented here.
Right.
It was more in the politics that I felt disoriented, because that's not introduced until a little later in the book. But
sure.
Once we were into the politics, I was like, oh, I'm into this. This is my jam
this is
here.
Your jam.
This is my jam.
Jammy jams. What do you think of the VFX so far?
I think overall good. There was a point where Rodriguez says, well, take a look at the city and you'll be impressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they show the city and I'm like, that doesn't look that good. But
it's just sort of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, you didn't do a great job making me go wow about the city.
Right. I think if they'd come up higher and looking down more, we would have gotten more impressed. Because it's not like they have skyscrapers. It's not a New York, it's not a Manhattan skyline.
It was just really weird for me that they left that line in when they didn't have a shot that was that breathtaking. Like they could have very easily just been like, okay, that ended in an unsettling feud, right? Like they didn't have to have that line. It was very odd to leave that in, but I don't know. That minor critique.
Yeah, I think there was some stuff like on the cliff and some stuff on the ship with Rodriguez and Blackthorne, or in the storm, like when the PAs are throwing buckets of water through the portholes and things. But there's nothing. It's all kind of, it's fine. It's fine. And then there's some other stuff that's perfectly good, like when we fly over the castle or fly over the city. There's some pretty nice shots. So I don't. There's nothing that's taking me out of it.
Right.
One little interesting thing, I did see something that I think is a 1-to-1 shot from the miniseries. There was a scene where they're folding up some bedding of Ishido's bedding in the morning when he's going through his morning ritual. And the way they fold the bedding, I think, is exactly from the miniseries. And maybe it's because both of them are doing it the way it would have been done. And so maybe it's
really
not
authentic
the shot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right.
So cool. You want to talk about some violence?
This is a Pukila +5 easily. Easily. I said +10 at one point.
Yeah,
I mean, the boiling is really the worst part, right? I mean,
that was the worst part.
There's a lot of, like, the baby is worse implied violence, but that's implied. The worst explicit violence is the boiling.
Yes. But even then, they don't show that much of it. We get more screams than we do actual.
They show enough of it, and I don't think that was necessary. Enough. I'm gonna critique them on this. I thought that was edgelord. I thought that was just too much. In the book, they do it with, like, people are hearing the screams, and like there's a what do they call them? A courtesan who's meant to be with one of the men, and she's like, I can't do this here. You know what I mean? Like, we're being shown how people are disturbed rather than needing to be shown the boiling face of a man. And I just thought that that's more effective and less gratuitous. Like
Okay.
you just didn't do anything for me except making me go, ugh.
So yeah, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting if they hadn't shown anything from the pot and we just heard the screams. We saw him go into it and then we heard the screams and we just had to leave it to our imagination.
I think
that would
that's honest. Most of the time, we learn this in Jaws, right? The monster's scarier if you don't see
right.
it.
Exactly.
You're
or
not
in
going to be
Andor
able
with
to
the Bix torture.
Right, you're never going to be able to make something scarier than the human mind can imagine.
Exactly. So I'm looking at this really awesome graphic, which we have not yet rolled out, that Aaron K put together for the Pukila scale. Did you see this? Did you
I have seen this. It's lovely.
All right. So Rings of Power is 0. Foundation is a +1. Wheel of Time would be a +2. Marvel Echo is a +3. House of the Dragon +4. Do you think that this is more or less violent than House of the Dragon?
I think more.
Really?
I think more. I don't think House of the
totally
Dragon
disagree.
has ever gotten to this level.
Wow.
Okay. Of this first episode. The second episode, I would say, yeah, no, House of the Dragon's more violent. This episode first episode pushed it over.
Because the boys were putting it +5.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the boys.
Wow, I don't see that at all. Am I just desensitized? Am I just a monster?
The boys are cartoon violence. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but it's so graphic.
Sure, but like, it feels like a comic book. The boys, there's just something about it where, like, also the violence is like sometimes intended to be funny, like, you know, the opening of the last season, right? This was not intended to be funny.
No,
nobody's laughing at the boiling man.
No,
and there's no level of absurdity to it. It's all horrific and violent, and I think that tonally, this has to be considered more violent than the boys.
Okay, let's finish cataloging all of the violent scenes. So there's the first beheading, which we don't see Omi actually a full strike. We just see the head.
Yeah,
we see the tip of the sword and the head just lops off.
That's not that bad. That's on par with the boys. You know, random violence,
right,
happening out of nowhere.
And then we have the boiling. Okay, granted, that's weird and creepy, and it was what it was. We had the execution that happens in the prison, but the interesting thing is that one of the prison wall, the wood pillars, actually blocks the killing blow. So we see the body and the strike, but the strike is blocked by a piece of wood, and then we see the head fall off, and it's a very quick scene.
Right.
Then we have the baby. But we don't see anything happen. We just see the shoji mats close, right? The doors close.
Mm-hmm.
But it's implied, like there's two scenes of implication of, that this is going to happen. And then we have the two fight scenes, the bandit fight scene, and then we have the maid who's slicing and dicing.
See, like the maid feels more like the boys to me.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
There's blood splattering everywhere. Yeah. There's a level of like absurdity to it almost because it's so quick and everyone's just like taken off guard.
Right.
But the boiling, again, I'm just going to say it. The boiling scene, you can say it's quick, but it exists. It exists in the show, and therefore it has to be factored into the grade.
I can't. I'm coming in about maybe a 3. I'm coming in at like a +3.
That's fine to be wrong. Look, in favor of my case, my wife decided to stop watching it at the boiling scene.
Sure,
she
can
said,
understand.
I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah, I get that.
It's too much for me. And so I'm using that as further evidence that this is an extremely violent show because she's watched a lot of violent stuff. It's not like she shies away from that. She even in samurai violence, she played the whole video game Ghost of Tsushima, and that gets really violent.
Sure. And you guys, part of your relationship is bonded over Last of Us, right? And that's a violent game.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's something about this. It was just so graphic and like I thought it was just unnecessary. That scene, really. I'm still gonna. That's my low point for the whole couple episodes.
So we're gonna see where we go from here. Whether we have any of those weird torture scenes. I get why that's off-putting, and then I didn't see nothing else in the rest of the episode or in the second episode ever came near that again. So
especially like it's a really weird thing and look, this is something from the book. It's not like they made it up. Like, Yabu. Sorry, they changed his name in this. He's just Yabu in the book. He's Yabu what in this? Let me
looking
check
guy.
before I speak out of turn.
Yabushige?
Yeah,
Kashigi
yeah,
Yabushige? Yeah.
Yabashige. Yeah, so he's just Lord Yabu in the book. I don't know if they extend it later, but um,
Yabushige-sama?
Yabashige, he is a violent guy, right? And he has
Yes.
this really
Yes.
sadistic and sociopathic tendency here.
Right.
And that is a thing in the book, right? That he's obsessed with this moment of death, that he has to, torture people, see what they are going to do. But again, like, you can show me that without ever having me see anyone suffer.
Mm-hmm.
You can show me that in many ways. But again, I don't want to harp on this minor criticism, because it is really a minor criticism. And I really loved the first 2 episodes. So let's move on from it.
All right. Fair enough. You want to talk about appropriation? Even a more fun subject.
Jesus Christ. Well, Jesus Christ is a big part of this show, so I can say Jesus Christ.
It's true.
How
do you feel? Well, you're reading the book, right? So you're starting to get into it. But how do you feel? Do you feel like, as you pointed out in our preview, this was a Australian naturalized American dude, man, white, we assume heterosexual male, who wrote a book about Asia in 1975. And how do you feel? So obviously FX is doing a different kind of storytelling. Do you feel like this is good storytelling?
I think so. And it looks like they did a lot of work and I'm fairly certain that James Clavell was known for doing a tremendous amount of research as well. So I don't want to discount him.
Right.
And though he is a white man, though he is a Western white man, I think he did do a lot of the homework to make sure that he was portraying things accurately. I think the book actually has more of a negative connotation with appropriation, largely because it was part of the Japan obsession that we found a lot of white people having in the 80s and 90s, right? And
well,
continuing.
We were coming out of, we had Bruce Lee as a cultural icon, and fascination with things, and food and fashion and all kinds of things. But then the Japanese.
I blame Ralph Macchio. I blame him.
What was Mr. Miyagi's? What was the name of the actor? Mr. Miyagi.
Morita.
Yes, Pat Morita. That's right.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah.
Hey, look at you.
I know.
Maybe we'll give you some honorary Gen X points there. You beat me on.
I love Karate Kid. That was like one of my childhood movies. I've watched all of Cobra Kai. I'm in on.
I'm so off on Cobra Kai. I've not watched a single one. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
I know. I know.
It's all 80s nostalgia. That's all it is.
Ugh. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. All right.
Well, anyway, speaking of appropriation of Japanese culture, anyway, I think that the show, in addition to being based on source material that was largely well-researched, has done a lot of work to contextualize it using, they have Rachel Kondo is one of the creators, and she's of Japanese descent. And I think that's good that you have one of the creators of Japanese descent. I can't speak tonight. And also they just hired a lot of, they did the work of retranslating back into ancient Japanese, and they made sure that the movements were correct, and they made sure that the folding is correct, and the costumes and the setting. And I think that they probably did even more work, largely because they had more people, right? When an author is researching a book, they might have a couple research assistants, but largely it's on them to make sure everything's right. This is a team effort, so it's just easier to make sure that we're bringing in the right people to make sure that this is done correctly.
Right.
So I think that the show is doing an even better job than the book in making sure it's historically accurate and respectful. And I like that they filmed it in Japan, right? I mean, I don't know where the miniseries was filmed back in the 80s.
In Japan.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that many series have been filmed elsewhere, right? I mean, but even like you look at True Detective Night Country was just filmed in Iceland instead of Alaska. So you never know.
Right. And that was for production reasons, because Alaska couldn't support the crew that they needed, in terms of the infrastructure that they needed. So where Iceland already had a thriving film industry.
Right.
We've got a couple of users on our Discord who do live in Japan, and I've sort of been poking at them to see if we can get some thoughts from them. Hopefully we'll get some more. I see Abby just posted a little bit ago. She said, I'll look out for what people are saying about it. So far, they're praising the production quality and that there isn't weird Japanese being spoken. She says some other folks here have a bee in their bonnet about comparing this show to Game of Thrones. This isn't fantasy. I read on a Japanese entertainment site that if you need to compare it to something, it's more like Succession or House of Cards, only medieval.
You know, Abby actually addressed the appropriation thing earlier on. I can copy paste it into our outline right here.
Sure, if you want to, you're more.
I'll just read it.
You're the guy who can pull up a sound clip and get it loaded without me even having an idea that you're
all right.
you're pulling some of that stuff.
Here we go. Just a thought, Abby says. On the is it authentic discourse and the stereotype concerns, this is a work of fiction. It's not meant to depict history exactly as a TV show. You can see these types of shows / movies in Japan all year round. Yes, this seems to have a much larger budget than some of the local stuff. Are those shows also stereotypical? Sure. Romanticizing the period? Sure. Is it okay if they're made locally? This is also shot here with a roster of very well-known and liked acting talent. Looks good, looks and sounds good so far, and again, it's TV entertainment, but of course, unlike the aforementioned local fare, is streamed worldwide, so the experts on Japan can now input their takes and concerns. Abby's going for him. Look, yeah, absolutely. I don't want to. I know Abby had a sick burn, but I also don't want to discount the appropriation discussion because I do think that that's an important discussion to have. And
yeah,
I'm just saying, from an outsider's perspective, and maybe somebody inside Japanese culture will have a different take, and I hope they'll write in and share with us. But from an outsider's perspective, it does look like the show is doing the work to make sure it's done right.
Yeah, and this whole question, Abby's post had me start thinking about this as well. What happens when a German production does a television series or movie about the American Old West and gunslingers? Mm-hmm. What happens when an English production does something about the Australian outback or, what have you? It happens all the time. And we ourselves in America, we fetishize the Old West.
Yep.
And the cowboy aesthetic and the gunslinger. When I was in Argentina, I was blown away by the amount of sort of gaucho cowboy stuff that they had everywhere. They were fetishizing themselves and turning it into tourist claptrap, and not even necessary for tourists, but also just for themselves.
Except we still have Pinkertons. Well, they don't always have the same villains in other cultures.
Okay.
Do you know that joke?
No.
Pinkertons.
You're saying one of your weird things again.
It's a real security force.
Yes, I know it's like a real security, and it still exists as a private security firm now.
And they were the big villain in Red Dead Redemption, the series, game series, which is a Western game series. Okay. There was a whole thing last year that somebody accidentally got a shipment of Magic cards early before the set released.
Okay.
And Wizards of the Coast actually sent Pinkertons to their house to break it and take it back. This is a real thing that happened.
Yeah, right.
So I always think of them as the still around modern day villains.
Fair enough. But anyway, I think that the point is that if FX is doing the work, I mean, Sanada, who plays Toranaga, he's a producer on this show. He's going around the set and doing all kinds of things and making sure things. They're hiring movement coaches and dialogue coaches and it's Japanese crews and Japanese actors and the whole script thing, like sending it, start in English, send it to Japanese, and then to colloquial Japanese, and then back again. I don't think there's any cause
63.
Here.
He looks great.
Amazing.
My God.
Yeah.
We need to get on his workout regimen.
So I feel like, and I think when we read, when you're reading the book, I'm watching the 80s miniseries, the way that they're recentering the story, and then this, I think, segues a little bit into the use of the flashback. I thought that was a great way of taking the story. So we're not just with Blackthorne and from this west to east perspective, but that we're actually moving into a full 360 view of the culture and the story here. So we're recentering in a central neutral point as opposed to any one person's perspective.
I agree with that.
By bringing us into the flashback, they're giving us setup and context and why we should care about why Toranaga needs to win this thing. Ultimately, or does he? Right? Or does he? Question.
I think Mariko, and I think that this is something that makes me want to follow her story the most. Mariko is kind of the culmination of this because she's a
Mhm.
Japanese woman
Marika
loyal
or
to one of
Marika? Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Potato,
Mariko.
potato. Mariko? I'm
I-
not sure.
I'm gonna, you know what? If somebody can write in if they want to correct me, I'm talking. You know which character I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes. The lady.
Mariko. I think it's Mariko,
Okay.
but I think Mariko. I think you're going with the Spanish do the second to last syllable thing,
Right. Where
but
yes,
we're
the
doing Japanese pronunciation.
emphasis.
I'm pretty sure you're supposed to emphasize the first syllable
Okay.
in Japanese. I could be
Mariko.
wrong. Mariko.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So Mariko. Now you make me not want to say it, but I think she's kind of the culmination of this because she's a Japanese woman who is loyal to her, her liege lord.
Right.
She's also a Catholic.
Yep.
She's also
Yep.
suspicious of the Portuguese.
Yep.
She's also suspicious of the English.
Yep.
She also is grieving and has this very weird relationship with living versus death. And
Which
she
we're going to
just
learn
feels
more about, I
so
assume.
yeah. And it just feels so like fleshed out. It just feels like she has complex motivations. I think that's the concern when we talk about appropriation and oversimplification of other cultures is that you'll turn them into a straight good guy or a straight bad guy.
Right. Right.
And
There's no nuance.
right, and here this is a nuanced character who has competing motivations, and I don't know what the hell she's going to do next in the best way because she has
Surprised and
so many
delighted.
different pressures on her.
Right.
And so that's why I think she's kind of the culmination of this let's make nuanced characters and divorce them from the tropes that you might be expecting.
Well, we're going to spend a little time talking about our three principles in a little bit. So I think that's a great starter point for when we get to Mariko in a little bit. Opening credits sequence. What did you think? Episode 2. They didn't have it in episode 1. It was only in episode 2.
I thought it was cool. I mean, I was nice that they kind of showed us what they were doing by the end of the episode already with the whole the garden.
Right. Yeah. I love that the episode 2 ended with a high shot of a top down shot of that same. Yeah, that was very cool.
He's like, "Sorry, little lord, about your garden, but I'm about to mess it up."
I was okay with it. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was great. It's definitely they're definitely putting it into the realm of Game of Thrones, Westworld. I'm trying to think. There's a couple more. The Crown. All of that stuff. But I didn't feel it didn't wow me as like a Game of Thrones opening does.
It's funny because when the House of the Dragon opening came on, people were like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah,
they ruined their good opening. They didn't even change the theme song, and they ruined the good opening.
It's such a thing now. It's a whole part of it. So
yeah. Whereas actually, I liked what Rings of Power did, where they would transition to a different point on the map in between scenes. And
right.
I think that would have been really helpful in this, actually.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. And I was just remembering the Rings of Power opening, which is the sand table vibrations.
That was pretty cool.
Which goes to the Ainulindale stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
yeah.
Cool.
All right, David, let's take another break. And when we get back, we will talk about our principles and key concepts. And we're back. So, David, you've got these key concepts from the episode that you wanted to discuss.
I like your comment that you put on the Google Doc, which is, as soon as this happened, I said, quote, David just wrote that down, close quote.
Well, I almost wrote it down myself, and I was like, he wrote that down already. I don't need to worry about that.
Everyone has 3 hearts. One in their mouth, and then during that scene, we get, or during that line of dialogue, we get a scene of Mariko. Then one in your chest for your friends. And then we get a scene of Muraji, who is the headman of the village, and with the pigeon. And then one that's secret, that if they want to survive, that they've got to, keep secret from themselves. And then that's when we see a scene of Toranaga reading the little carrier pigeon message. But I think, not unlike True Detective and Rose's statement about the 3 types of ghosts, I think this is going to be a key part of the show, and thinking about, every character and thinking about their heart that's in their mouth, the heart that's in the chest, and then the heart that's secret. And then we can use that to understand the different motivations and the human hearts in conflict with themselves.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to have a fight with 3, you know? Now it's a
Yeah,
party.
that's right. It's the Spider-Man all pointing at each other.
Exactly.
Oh, that'd be a good meme, right? That it's all the human heart in conflict with itself.
Yeah, it's just get Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield, and you'll be all set.
I thought it was interesting. Well, I'm going to save it till we get to Mariko, but there's something about this that I think is interesting in that conversation. So, but obviously you picked it up as well, so that's a thing we want to keep an eye on. There were 2 other things that I thought were interesting that were given to us by, well, all of these actually were given to us by Rodriguez, weren't they? Because he's the one that says about the hearts, right? He does at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
He also talks about Shukumai, when they are on the deck of the ship, and he's talking about fate versus destiny, and about accepting your path in life. And I tried to put the word Shukumai into Google, and I didn't get a lot back.
Yeah, fate, destiny, predestination.
Yeah, which makes me think of determination versus free will, which is a big conversation that we have in some of our genre television series these days.
And was a big thing in the Reformation, was it not? Calvinism and all that stuff?
It must be, right? It must be. So we've been having this conversation for a while as a species.
Yeah.
Because if you have an all-knowing,
maybe the Catholics will have something to say about this.
Because if you have an all-knowing God who knows everything, then you're sort of predestined, which is interesting because Blackthorne, even though he's a Protestant, but he still believes in an all-powerful God. And if you have an all-powerful God, doesn't that mean your fate's already determined?
Well, I believe the Calvinists were part of Protestantism and were determinist. I think so. There's 2 main schools of thought within Christianity, right? With predestination, which is one is God is all knowing and God has everything planned. You just have the illusion of free will. The other is God knows that for good to exist, evil has to exist. And you have to have the choice to do evil for good to exist. And so those are the sort of the 2 schools of thought. I think Tolkien had a weird hybrid view where he said, your fate is the overall arc of the world is predetermined, but the fate of your soul is free will. Like
interesting.
You can choose to be part of the good or part of the evil.
Mm-hmm. But there's a moral arc to the universe, so to speak. The universe is going in a direction that I set it in, and what happens to you in between here and there is your choice.
Right. So like Gollum, like the ring was going to get destroyed, but Gollum trying to steal it for himself meant that his soul was not saved. Whereas if Gollum had tried to destroy the ring willingly, his soul might have been saved.
Interesting. Right. But the ring was going to get destroyed nonetheless at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's the whole point in Tolkien's view. This does not matter for this show. Let's move on.
No, but this is perfect Lorehounds. This is what we do, right? We mix our stews. We mix up our we have a good time.
Get a good lore stew going.
The Zehi Mo Goyim. Oh boy, now I broke my mouth.
Zehi Mo Gozaimasen.
Thank you, Gozaimasen. Which is one cannot. Which is what Rodriguez says is that one cannot resist the unseen path of nature. All we can do is accept our small part. And then Blackthorne.
Wait, hey!
Oh, you say this line.
It's bullocks. I fought too long and too hard to get here.
Very good. That's pretty good. You're doing a good job.
It's not that hard. You just make your voice gravelly. Put on a bad British accent.
Yeah.
That's
real
Blackthorne.
Real burn. Yeah. So again, I think it just goes into this whole idea of and I think when we get to
he's from New Jersey, Cosmo Jarvis? Oh, I could do that accent all day.
Is he from New Jersey or Jersey? I think he's from Jersey.
No, he's from Ridgewood, New Jersey.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh, God. I thought he was English.
No, he has an English father. Oh, I'm sorry. He moved to England with his parents as a baby. I'm lying here. Okay, so hold on. Let's figure this out here. I think he grew up in England actually, but he was born in New Jersey, and therefore he is not an authentic Brit.
That's hilarious. You can tag him with it for that Jersey stuff. I love it. But I think this is going to go to, when we talk about our main characters here in just a second, this is, we have a key line from each of these characters that tell us who they are. And I think, this just goes into this determinism versus free will argument, which is, you give yourself up to fate and you follow your destiny. And Blackthorne is saying, bollocks, I am
Bollocks.
the master of my own destiny.
He almost spits it out. He goes, he's bollocks.
Bollocks.
All right. Yeah,
so
I think that's right.
And it'd be interesting to get some translations on that if anybody has any ideas. I would love to have a little bit more of a conversation around this whole concept of free will versus determinism, and in its different forms and iterations. With a Buddhist overlay or a Christian overlay, or what have you. So
yeah.
I think it's interesting. Let's talk about our characters, for our primary characters a little bit. Toranaga Sama. So another interesting thing that I was learning about is the honorifics.
Yeah, that's like Lord, right?
Yeah, well, but then your honorific could be formal or informal. It could be insulting if you leave it off, or if you use the super friendly one. If you if you say, "Oh, John, my dearest Jono,"
John, right? It was like John Chan, because John is like we were really close. Like I this is embarrassing, but I know all this from Persona, because they, you have to do everyday high school life too in the game, and they all talk to each other with senpai or Chan or whatever.
Okay.
But anyway, so I had to learn all the different things so that you don't insult people.
There you go.
So I knew some of them. But it's funny. It's funny to see all that.
And then depending on the era too, right? And then what's your status? What's your relative status to the other person? And are you low or high relative to them? So it was really fascinating. So, but anyway, Lord Toranaga, who's played by Hiroki Sanada, who is, like I mentioned already, he's a producer on the show. And again, shout out to the official podcast. He has some comments, and they talked to him a little bit about it. But man, this guy was born to play this part. This is an iconic role for him.
He's really great. This character is fascinating to me, especially the beginning of episode 2 really made him much more fascinating to me. This whole idea of you've been offered power and yet you won't take it because you know that it's brittle. You'd rather earn the power for yourself than take it easily.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that in that regard. You're absolutely right.
It's not that he wouldn't have taken it if it were real power, but he knows that it's empty.
Yeah. And remember, that scene where he refuses it, but then later on, the Taiko's widow is saying, like, when she's talking to him about the tree being propped up, right? Like you could be Shōgun, dude. Why don't you be Shōgun? And he's like, again, he's still thinking about the precariousness. If he actually took that role, it would be his immediate downfall.
Right.
Very quickly, his enemies would coalesce and take him down.
But what I loved about that scene, I think I'm kind of bringing in one of my favorite scenes right now. This was one of my favorite scenes because it showed me how smart he was. He didn't just say, they'll kill me. He said, they'll kill me, then your son. He put the stakes back on him. He's like, all right, you're right.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's play Gnarls' voicemail.
Okay.
One of two voicemails, because I think that this voicemail, so each of these characters has a key moment in the first couple of episodes where the writers explicitly tell us who this person is.
Also, I'm sorry, I think you mispronounced Gnarls, his name.
Gnarls? Should we play Gnarls? That's an emphatic. So anyway.
There you go. All right, I'm going to play Gnarls now.
Howdy, Lorehounds. Wanted to call in to highlight one specific piece of dialogue that on first impression worried me, but by the time that episode 2 had ended, it had totally sold me that the writing on this show is exceptional. The scene is from episode 1, when Toranaga is heading to the castle and showing off his falconry skills. The falcon flies up into the sun and comes crashing down on its unsuspecting prey. One of Toranaga's boys runs up to him in amazement, and the Lord's response is that the bird conceals herself against the sun, conserving energy, waiting for her moment. You might never know she's there. Initially, I kind of groaned at this line, as I thought it was meant to be a general statement about Japan versus the West and how the West colonial mindset would work to underestimate the Japanese. And I was thinking, why would a single feudal lord be thinking in a macro scale like this? Well, it's because he was not. He was talking about his own strategy in navigating the rocky waters of Osaka Castle and the Council of Five. This is just a small example, but I'm using it to give big props to Rachel Kondo, Justin Marks, and the rest of the writing team that adapted James Clavell's book for the screen. Oh, and remember, just as Yabushiga told Blackthorne while saving him from bandits in the forest, all a lorehound wants is a good lore master.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Thanks, Gnarls. Really appreciate it. I totally agree. That's a great line, and I didn't really catch how that applied until you pointed that out. So thank you.
I wrote that down just as soon as it was said as well. I caught that one just as much, and it is absolutely who Toranaga is. He's going to wait until the time is right, and then he'll strike, decisively.
And he keeps people around him, show me three of your friends kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think he intentionally keeps somebody like Yabushiga around him because he knows that he will do the dirty work without even telling him. Right? He will give him plausible deniability.
Right. And he sees him, and he lets him know that he sees him, right? Oh, you seem to have a penchant to always being in the right place at the right time.
Right.
Oh, yes, I do. Oh, he's like, you're, but he's keeping him just in check. But yeah, that's a really good point. Yabushiga is a very useful tool.
Yep. And I think I might know too much about his motives from the book.
Sure.
Because he can be a POV character at times.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And although Clavell writes in a very not modern way in that way, like he'll just jump between POVs and not tell you in the middle of a chapter, things like that.
Interesting.
But in general, I know more of Yabushiga's thoughts than I would have normally.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's something that's important to know about Toranaga is that he, and this is talked about a little bit, but it's not 100% clear, I think. And then when I saw Aaron K's diagram that we have in the show guide, in the episode guide, Toranaga's born of a noble family, the Minowara, and that noble family, amongst a couple of others, they're the only ones who can ever claim the title Shōgun. Everyone else who becomes the same functional status as the Shōgun in terms of like all the other lords are under my control, then they would be a taiko. So it's like having the position, but the title is a little bit extra.
I don't think that's right. I think the taiko is the one who is restricted to a specific family because the taiko is supposed to be descended from a divine bloodline, whereas the shogun can be immortal. The shogun is the highest status a mortal can get. So the taiko is the godly, the holy line.
But I believe Ishido cannot take the title of shogun. He can. No, he can be positioned, but he can't use the title. Anyway, the graphic on the episode guide, that's what Aaron K had put out. He came to the same
I'm going to be fact checking you. You could be right, but
so it's in the episode 2 thing. Is of peasant lineage, rules a military dictator of Japan. So that's a taiko, and a shogun is of a specific noble lineage.
Why don't we leave it open? I'll do some more research before next week. We'll get people writing in. And if I'm wrong, I hope that 50 people write in to tell me.
You're a monster, John. You're a monster.
I know. I didn't get much pushback for True Detective, and I was throwing out hot takes left and right on the finale.
It's true.
Yeah.
So okay, cool. Blackthorne. Blackthorne.
This isn't the end for me. I won't die in this wretched land.
And that's his motivate. That's a chief motivation that he has, right? That's he's going to do what it takes to survive.
Yeah,
and he's not going to only survive. He's going to thrive. Ultimately, he knows how to thrive.
But what I love about Blackthorne is he comes in really cocky, attitude of the colonist, trying to come in. I'm smarter than these guys. I'm, I
He's
can
godless.
beat them up.
He's yes, right.
Yeah, and what I love about this is it kind of flips it on its head, right? They're calling him the barbarian. They're making him say I'm a dog. And the minute
that was a really funny scene. That was
a
funny
scene. But the minute that Yabushige is about to kill himself with seppuku, and then comes back up and just stands in front of Blackthorne just gives it the fuck up. He just lays down in front of him. He's like, "You are my lord. I need to learn from you." Basically, like
I took it less as a lord thing, is like honoring the fact that he made it back up. Like, dude, like I don't have a way to say dude. I have to bow, and that
broski.
Yeah, broski. Like, yo, that was amazing, dude. Like, you have my respect. I took it more as a bow of respect.
I thought it was respect combined with like terror at the capabilities of these people.
That's actually, I hadn't thought about that. The fact that he actually is seeing that Yabushige is not fucking around. Like, he can fall 20 feet off a rope, get some rope burn, get some really bad rope burn by catching himself, full body weight catching himself, then falling, then rescuing, then getting washed in the ocean, but accepting his death at his own hand, at his own hand, and then climb his ass back up to the top of that cliff. Cold, shivering, whatever. I hadn't thought about that. The amount of sheer willpower to get through that situation. Yeah, I get that now. I get that on a much deeper level now.
And so I love when later you see this reflected later. It's not like this is a one-time thing. It really does leave an impact on him. Later, he's like basically shaking when he's talking to. I forgot who he was telling, but I think it was the priest. Is he a pastor? I don't know his title.
A priest. He's a priest.
He is a priest of the Protestant faith in the. Oh no, I'm sorry. I thought he was talking to the guy in the prison with him, but he was actually talking to Rodriguez.
Right. Oh yeah, that's right.
He's talking to Rodriguez, and he's saying, he was about to, cut himself open. He's like, yeah, that's what they do, buddy. That's, they're choosing their time of death.
And that's what opens up that Zaimoe Gas that previous conversation we were having. Right. That's where this line comes in.
But he can't even fathom this, partially because he's a Christian and he believes that suicide is going to condemn your soul to hell. But partially,
that's a good point.
Which is a thing that they say several times in the book. So it's like, it's a big, like,
it's
worldview shift.
Right.
Which is funny because Rodriguez is unfazed by this because he's just so used to it by now. And he actually seems to admire Yabushige for doing it. He's like, well, what better than to choose the time of your death and the manner?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear a priest say that.
Yeah. A priest or you mean Rodriguez?
Yeah, sorry.
Rodriguez is not a priest.
A Catholic.
Okay, sure. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rodriguez is a heck of a character. He's great.
I like him. I want him to stick around.
Yeah, for sure. He was played by John Davies in the 80s version. Okay. You know John Davies?
No.
Oh, you know him if
John Davies.
John Rhys Davies?
Everybody knows John. Oh, it's Gimli.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know who John Rhys Davies is. I just don't know his name.
So in the miniseries, they're much more buddies. He doesn't pull a pistol on him or any of that kind of stuff, and they have they have a lot of fun together. Both him and Richard Chamberlain have a lot of fun on TV.
That's
on TV
cool.
Screen with each other.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, my point is, I think that it really sticks with Blackthorne when he sees this happen, and then later when he's talking to Toranaga, he says, well, what would happen if you and I were enemies? And he goes, I couldn't see myself as your enemy. He goes, well, I could. So what would happen if we're enemies? Great line. Great line.
Yes.
He's like,
totally.
you're not dodging this question, buddy.
Yeah. Answer.
And the way he says, well, then I would commend my soul to God, because surely I would not withstand an enemy like you. I think he means it there.
Yep.
He's really realized that these warriors are like nothing he's ever seen, and he cannot defeat them.
Which goes back to the line that Rodriguez says to him, go up on deck and look out at that city and tell me what kind of man wields power in a land such as this.
Well, they could have done a better job doing that, but it's fine. It's fine.
CGI,
it's fine. I'm gonna my headcanon is he was very impressed by that city.
Exactly. Yeah. and that's true. And that's the point. You know, we're in these small confined moments, but we don't realize how much power Toranaga or Shido or, you know, any of the other lords have.
And I think that he's kind of like, by the end of episode 2, his stance is, well, if my goal is to not die in this wretched land, then I have to become one with this wretched land, and I have to learn the ways of these people, because I cannot, you know, defeat them, and I cannot rise from my ashes without really learning from these teachers.
And that's the point, is that this isn't the end for me, right? He's not going to let any of these changes throw him off course. He has this really strong will, and he's going to use that and use all his power to keep himself moving forward.
Exactly.
So let's talk about Mariko a little bit. And
Mariko,
I think her central line here is this one: I have more than one heart.
She's got a lot of faces she puts on.
And
a lot of hearts.
I think from a character standpoint, that's super illuminating, but it also is super opaque. What does that mean? And if we talk about, you know, that each person has 3 hearts, you know, one for your friends, one for yourself, and or wait, what is it? No, one for the world, one for your friends, and one for yourself. And, you know, does she have 9 hearts or something, or is this, you know? But she's there's it's causing a duplicity within her. There's something else going on. She's not a simple character, and they're not yet ready to reveal that to us. But if she can live under these circumstances and be effective in all of these moments, to live with a not great husband, right? Like that guy, Buntaro is not, man, I love having this character guide, right? It was right? That, you know, Buntaro, who is jealous of the fact that, not only jealous, but I think he feels so inferior. He married up so big time that he is so, that his toxicity, you know, this male toxicity is coming out in that he knows his wife is 100 times his better.
Right. Well, why should she have to leave the house? Or, you know, I think he said, why should she have to be anything outside this house?
Exactly.
Which is truly a horrible sentiment.
Yeah. When your lord, your liege lord is requesting your wife. That's a huge honor. I don't know that dude he's small. He's really small.
Oh, when he starts to get up and then he's like, not you. Oh man, that is truly the kick in the cojones, as they're saying in
that's right.
Where are your cojones? I'd like to keep them with me. I think that was one of the quips, right?
Yes. So those are our 3 main our 3 main protagonists. And I think they've really done a good job of, I think we're going to get more in Mariko. We really had to get Blackthorne and Toranaga up to speed, but I think we've got enough of her now that we've got a really great power trio going on here.
Yeah, towards the end of episode 2, I thought she was really coming together as a character.
More in focus.
And so I'm hoping that's why maybe that's why I'm most intrigued by her, is that I feel like I know enough about the other 2 for now. For the story to keep going.
And then she's set up intentionally to have some mystery that's going to resolve over the course of things. Yep. And at some point it's going to conjoin her process is going to mingle with the plot, the main plot dynamics. So let's quickly talk about balance of power dynamics. So we've got Toranaga, the regents, and the Jesuits.
Yep. I guess the whole point of this Jesuit thing is that the Japanese want the Chinese products, but the Chinese hate the Japanese, so they won't sell them to the Japanese. And so the Jesuits came in and said, all right, we will sell you the Chinese products at a premium.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll bring back the Japanese riches to Portugal and Spain.
And make out on both ends of the equation.
Right.
What is it when you charge a fee on top of a fee, or is it usury or something like that?
Usury,
yeah. Where you're, but is that loan? That's more about loan.
Usury is like, I think it is excessive interest, basically.
Okay.
Usury definition: lending money at unreasonably high rates of interest. Yeah. But they use the term usury all the time in this, so there must be some kind of interest on this charge, because otherwise they wouldn't be using that word.
Well, I just think of it as of like eBay. When I sell something on eBay, and then PayPal, not only does eBay charge me a fee, but then PayPal charges me a fee. For the same transaction, I get two fees from the same platform for the same transaction.
Well, so let's not get started on Ticketmaster before we
no, I
cause everyone's blood pressure to go up.
Yeah. But so they're making out hugely here on this thing.
Yep. And they're hiding the fact that they're hiring Japanese Ronin.
Right.
And so that also, I wasn't aware of like the definition of a Ronin and what that's going on. So that's
you didn't.
A Ronin, I did know by the end of all this.
Okay. But, interesting. It's a lordless samurai. Yeah.
Right. And they're kind of looked down upon, right? Because they are lordless.
They are out of pocket from society. They are outside of the rules and the structures of how a samurai should operate and be controlled and be managed. There is this box that you live in, and if you're outside of that, you're a danger to society.
Right, and so they're not happy to learn that in this episode that they're hiring Ronin.
No, especially when you learn the fact that the Jesuits think that they, that they have this force that could basically, when they're ready, to decapitate you and depose you. So if we don't like who's rising up in power, we have the force necessary to come in and to make to produce, what's the word? Coup d'etat. To not even a coup d'etat. We're just going to come in and assassinate you, right? That's a coup. That's a coup d'etat.
That's a coup. Yeah. So I mean, you're already seeing it happening with that war, right? You have 3 of the 5 council members as Christians, as Catholics.
Yeah.
I think that the council lost Ishido's confidence when they used the word demand. When they said, we demand
that's a good point.
that he be executed. And you can kind of see Ishido's face like twitch a little bit. He's like, oh, you demand. That's interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
3-1. I'm outnumbered right now, but I'm going to remember this.
And I'm outnumbered, and we're about to vote to get rid of the only other non-Christian on this council.
Yes. Oh,
and
that's a really good take.
Toranaga is a fucking genius to play them against each other like this.
Right. And I love that scene where Mariko, where he kind of nods at her. He says, you see it, you explain it. And she's like, and you can see it emerging out of her. She's like, oh, I see the plan. And that was such a great insight into both of those characters. It was beautiful.
Absolutely. So that was why it was so smart for him to bring Blackthorne back into the mix, because he's a wild card.
Yep.
And he didn't even know how wild of a card he was, right? He didn't even know at the time that he was going to blow the whole chimney on the Portuguese scheme.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, especially when you have Ono, a leper who's very quiet and rarely speaks up, suddenly going, in the name of Jesus Christ, you will execute him. And it's like, which, I know. We can laugh about the ridiculousness of that.
Yeah.
But I think Ishido's just like, oh, fuck this. Like, anybody cornered like that would automatically have the instinct to resist.
So here's an interesting take. So we have that whole scene of Ishido going through his morning daily routines and having to do the bureaucratic work. of stamping the papers, and he's looking at his armor, and then he's looking at the Taiko's armor, and he's like, God, I got to sit here and stamp papers and deal with these assholes. Is this what rulership is? Is it really what it is? But in some ways, I wonder if, and he hates Toranaga because Toranaga's highborn, and he's something that that Ishido can never be. But isn't Ishido more like Toranaga than he is than the other three regents?
In some ways,
who would he rather hang out with? Is Toranaga in some ways? Like that's a more fruitful and enriching relationship rather than Ono and Sugiyama and Kiyama, who are just greedy zealots.
I think the Portuguese were playing them against each other, and this is shaking it up. The Portuguese were basically having him keep an eye on
2.
Right, and so Ishido is more focused on the traditional power struggle of the noble versus the peasant, or this one guy who's in the past his family line ruled versus everybody else. Well, at the same time, this other takeover was happening, this hostile takeover, right? This, if we're going to like corporate takeovers, this poison pill of Christianity. You were drinking water when I said poison pill, and you like stopped. You're like, oh shit, am I poison? But this poison pill of and look, I'm not insulting Christianity here. Do what you want, but infecting this council and just being like, this is the thing that's going to turn things over. And so, without ever firing a bullet, without ever killing a person, they can just. Well, I guess they'll kill you, Toranaga. If they get
they'll remove you.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah,
there's no war. There's no full-out conflict, and they're going to take over this council. They'll immediately have a majority on this council, an overwhelming majority, the minute that Toranaga is dead.
Right, and Ishido is useful because he can get stuff done, but he's got to be controlled. So the other three regions think that they can keep him boxed in.
Right,
because then he's 3-1.
Alone, he's absolutely stuck, and I think he's finally realizing that, and he's not going to let Toranaga die now. He's going to have an uneasy alliance with him.
Oh, that's super interesting. Oh boy, this is your jam, isn't it? This is your jam.
It is. I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this a lot.
I love it. Okay, cool. It's interesting too to think about the fact that Christianity is very old, but Christianity has gone through a lot of iterations. Like, if you were to go down to a nearby church from wherever you live in these, in the United States, from our vantage point, a Christian today would have no idea that, Vasco Rodriguez or Del Aqua, the head of the Jesuit mission there, that this was Christianity in this part of the world in this era of time, building up the Portuguese church in this way, and the Roman church, and the Pope as well, because I'm sure they were paying the Pope something too. That it's just wild to think about all of these different forms of Christianity and how different people have used this word Christian for all these different motivations. Okay, I'm done waxing historical for a moment.
I'm liking it. So I think we're in for a treat with all the political machinations of all these people. By the way, in searching for Minowara stuff, I did discover that I was wrong about Taiko versus Shōgun. And so I'm just going to correct myself now before we get a million right-ins. Save your keyboard warrior energy. And just know that I am wrong and that Shōgun is a more desirable title than Taiko.
Mark
more
this
restricted.
Mark this moment.
Why? I always admit when I'm wrong.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. But we like the feedback, so don't hesitate to send John a nice email.
Fair enough.
We like feedback. We're all about community here. Should we talk about our favorite moments?
I just want to say quickly, there's a podcast I listen to that uses their website / you're wrong for corrections. And you can type it in. Maybe we should have that.
You're wrong at thelorehounds.com.
Yeah.
That's fun. That would be a fun one. Cool.
Yep.
All right. What do you got? Favorite moments?
I'm going to go quickly because I feel like I've already pretty much talked about them.
Okay.
But really loved, again, the intro to episode 2. I really loved the point where...
What was the intro? Which part of
that was the cold open with Toranaga getting the option to be Shōgun.
Oh, the flashback.
Yeah, the flashback.
Yep.
Yeah. Really love that. I can't remember where episodes begin and end, so I think this was in episode 1, but Blackthorne ripping the cross from the priest.
Yes,
really
that was
amazing.
in episode 1, and when he was before Yabashige
Yeah.
early on. Yep.
Because he's a wild card at that point, and he doesn't even know that he just saved himself by doing that. Because Yabushige would have just killed him first. He was right there. But he became interesting to Yabushige. And he was more interesting alive than dead, because he was like, these Christians are a pain in my ass. And he says he's Christian, but I don't know. He just ripped off a cross and doesn't seem to like the Portuguese. So something's interesting about him. I want to figure him out before I kill him.
You know, in the 80s miniseries, and I don't know if this is in the book, there's this whole thing with Rodriguez. They actually go over to the Erasmus as opposed to just going straight back to the Rodriguez's ship. And Rodriguez explains to him that part of the culture is that you have to hold your own, and you have to bluster as hard and as high as you can go, but then also kind of know when your limits are as well. And so there's this whole thing of really standing your ground in certain points, and then, puffing up your chest and really, going for it, and sort of berating a junior. Oh, like, if you want to get past that security guard, you've really got to put on a show saying that I am the Lord's vassal and I'm doing this work and blah, 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 and hope that, he's not going to check on you or something like that. But you got to really do this bluster. And in that moment, when he does grab the cross, he's doing that in the right way, which is, I'm standing up and arguing from a place that I know is right for me. I'm sort of arguing my authenticity. And if you don't do that, then that's sort of cowardly, and you're small in that way. And so you're going to be treated that way.
Right. And honestly, I have two things to say about that. One is, it is absolutely terrifying to be captured and only have your enemies as your translator.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's one disadvantage Blackthorne's already got Blackthorne. But the other thing is that this guy, I lost it in the middle of my sentence.
Oh no, I hate that.
God damn it.
It'll come back. You have license to call it back whenever it comes up.
Oh God. Oh God, it's gone. It's gone. I'm old now.
You've crossed the threshold.
I've crossed the threshold.
Okay, it'll come back.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
There it is. Yeah,
so there's a big difference between cowardice and humility, right?
Yes.
And I think that in the beginning, Blackthorne is trying so hard to be brave that he's lacking humility.
Yeah.
And by the end of
yeah.
episode 2, he's not groveling. He's not showing weakness, but he's showing
out of fear. He's not groveling out of fear. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
He's showing humility after seeing a display of power beyond his imagination.
Dude, you should have a podcast.
I know. I've been talking for a while.
That's a really great point, because he's not showing. Yeah, he's not doing it out of fear, like, you're going to take my life, or I'm afraid of the consequences. He's, what you just climbed up that cliff, that was something else. I'm giving you honor. Or when he's in before Toranaga, wow, you're a boss that controls. Well, he doesn't control Osaka, but anyway, you're that at this level. And everything
you're the
around
boss of the guy who just climbed up the cliff. Yeah,
you got to be even extra. And then you've got all these samurai guys around you, and everybody deferring to you in this way. Yeah, that's a really cool point. I like it.
So give me your favorite moments before we head out.
Sure. Quickly, episode 1, Toranaga hunting with the falcon, and that's where we got the. Oh, you know what we forgot to do?
What's
we
that?
forgot to play Brian 8063's.
I thought we were going to do that after this.
Oh no, we can. I just don't. I just wanted to make sure we had it.
Yep. It's
noted.
preloaded.
Yep. So Toranaga hunting with the falcon. I really enjoyed that. The music during the Regents meeting was really good, and it really created the ambiance and the sense of tension, and then the political dynamics that were going on. So really great moment there. when Rodriguez and Blackthorne are talking in his cabin when they pull into Osaka. That was great. And I love that, he was going to club him with the mug, but he had the pistol ready to go.
He knew what he was doing.
I like you, Ingles, but I'm a Spaniard and I sail with the Portuguese, so we can be buddies.
Yeah.
We may swap some sea shanties and have a drink, but we're still enemies.
It is a little weird to have them speaking Portuguese signaled by them occasionally putting in
the Spanish flourish on it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very strange.
Yeah. I don't know. It all works for me. And then in episode 2, the first interview between Blackthorne and Toranaga, obviously that was fire. And then I thought the fight scene with the maid was badass.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was really cool. There was one moment where she's hiding behind a doorway and a dude's coming in with his sword out, and she tings his sword up out of the way so that she can get a strike in, right? She just deflects his sword. It was like, oh man, this is so good. This is just...
Do you think she lived at the end for them to interrogate her?
No, she's dead.
She's full dead. We're sure.
Well, it was interesting that Toranaga, because he struck her in exactly the right place so that it's a mortal wound, but that she wasn't going to die immediately. And I think he would have pressed for a little bit more information, or a little bit, he was observing when Blackthorne, and he was ready for her to come at him with the knife. He had already had his guard up and he was going to do his move when Blackthorne came rushing in.
Do you think he was testing if Blackthorne would try to save him?
No, I don't think he was. I think he was surprised that Blackthorne showed up.
Okay.
And that, and it was really interesting because Blackthorne doesn't run away from the danger. He gets up and runs to the danger.
Yeah.
And that's a telling moment of the character, and that he is willing, he within how many days that, he's been thrown into jail and pulled out of jail and whatever, that he's willing to put his life on the line for Toranaga in that moment. When Toranaga had that situation totally controlled, he was like, bro, it's cool.
Yeah.
But then Toranaga's like, oh, okay.
He's like, I survived Westworld. I'm fine here.
Exactly. But he's like, okay, you're willing to give your life to save mine. All right. Now now there's something here now. And I thought that was a really great dynamic that was going on there. So,
I mean, to take a little credit away from Blackthorne, he couldn't sleep anyway because he was on the Japanese bed. He's just bored.
He was like fussing with the pillow. That was perfect. So good.
Oh boy.
All right.
Shall we hear from Brian 8063?
We shall.
All right. Here we go.
John and David. I feel we're jumping in the deep end of the pool with this show. There's a lot going on, visually and plot-wise. I think we really have a lot of layers going on. We have the Wars of Reformation among the Europeans playing out in Japan, the clash of religion with the Europeans and the Japanese, with Christians, Confucianism, Buddhists, behavior based on honor, and finally greed and power relating to trade and a colonial mindset. I'm sure we will discuss these layers in greater depth, but I want to quickly mention how much change in Japan is happening in this time period. Japan is on the verge of a transformation, and it must have been very unsettling. We have Christianity on the island. We have these regional military lords using new military technology, and the impact of Europeans coming into the country. And finally, peasant revolts and uprisings were actually fairly common at this time period. The Portuguese traders only came to Japan in 1543. The first Jesuit priest, Francis Xavier, came in 1549. This is not a long time, and it brought such an upheaval. You feel there's quicksand everywhere. I plan to read a little more of the history because this is what I like to do. Thanks for doing the podcast. I'm looking forward to all the coverage and feedback. Brian 8063.
Thanks, Brian. I love when Brian writes in or calls in because it's always informative.
I was going to say this is a perfect end cap email or voicemail for the episode. It's I think he puts his finger on all of the right things. He messaged me earlier saying that he's got access to a bunch of historical stuff through his professional job. And so I feel like we're going to get some more cool insights from Brian over the
excited.
The course of this. Yeah. Thanks, you, Brian. We're looking forward to it. And to everyone else and to our friends who listen in Japan or anywhere else. We want to hear from you. I mean, our podcast, yeah, we're here, but we are a community. And so we want your voice to be a part of our podcasting. So, well, I think that, are we going to wrap it up? Are we done? We good?
Let's do it. Let's just talk quickly about our Patreon benefits. Okay. Again, we are doing, I shouldn't even say we, you should say it, David, as a royal we, but you are spearheading.
I wave my hand in a sort of flappy way?
You are spearheading the effort of creating the show guide, the rudder, if you will.
Yes.
For this show. So if you're a patron or a Supercast subscriber, you can go and click on the Patreon links tab in the Discord and get all the links. Or if you're having trouble finding them, just send us an email or a message. We'll help you get there. It's got a character guide. It's got episode guides. It's got plenty of stuff in there.
We're building it up as we go. So, there's a lot there. The primary use case for the character guide, though, is just so that, while you're watching, you can check your phone really quick and see who's who in a particular scene.
It helps. It really helps.
It's helped us today not look like a couple of bumbling idiots when we're trying to remember somebody's name. So.
Not always, at least.
Yeah.
So, yes, thank you to all the new subscribers who have joined us during True Detective. We are going to have a second breakfast this month, which will be a lot of fun. I think we're going to do one more old man movie. Which one are we doing? Do we have it picked out already?
I think it's got to be, we dropped.
Is it Dragon Slayer?
Yeah, I think it's got to be Dragon Slayer, doesn't it? I haven't done March programming, so
yeah,
we were so busy with True Detective.
Yeah, so we'll get another second breakfast out. There's a backlog of 13 of them if you want to go listen to them now. You got plenty of backlog for you. And some Fireside Chats, there will be a new one of those during March. Of course, if you're not a subscriber, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say for subscribers too, remember we have the show tracker, and I just sent out a Patreon message for all the shows that are starting in March. I'm going to try and do that on a regular basis for our subscribers again, so that you can just have an awareness of like, oh, there's like, I think Marilyn, she didn't realize that the Dick Turpin show is about to start. So like,
which it has the Great British Baking Show host, right?
Well, yes, Noel Fielding. He's well known prior to that.
I only know him from that.
Sure, yeah.
Which
the Mighty
funny.
Boosh. He was on the Mighty Boosh and a bunch of other things. So,
oh man. All right.
Good stuff.
Cool.
Anyway, the show tracker is there as well as the show guide. So
nice.
Lots of benefit.
So you'll get plenty of stuff on the Patreon, early ad-free access, and you're always giving us a hand producing the content. We share some proceeds with co-hosts for their appearances with us. So, we'll hope you consider joining us on there. If not, there's still plenty of content coming for you, both from us and our affiliates. For us, I know we had to move our recording, but we're doing an Earthsea episode with Marilyn shortly. More Silmarillion stories coming for Of Men. More Star Wars Film Fest coming, where we're doing A New Hope next. You just did a one-shot with Ron for Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yep,
and that's coming out Monday. Next week.
Yep. For the Patreons, our patrons already have it, and it'll be out public on Monday. We had a lot of fun with that. We did the whole 8 episodes and had a hoot.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. I know Brandon and I are going to do a Halo episode this month for at least the game and probably the show right after that.
Okay.
So
cool.
We're going to have a good time with Halo this month. It's Halo month.
Halo month. We have also it's also Dune month. We're also got to pull some Dune coverage together because the movie's out. And we just re-released the Properly Howard movie review episode where you and I and Alicia joined Steve and Anthony on theirs.
I always forget the recordings we do. Do you ever do that? You're like, I forgot I covered this.
And I was thinking today, it just occurred to me, like, oh, we should put that back out. And I listened to today, man, that was a really good podcast. It was really funny. I think
I made one too many Wonka jokes, but sure.
No, sure. It was all right. It was good.
All right.
So I think we're going to get the band back together for that, for Dune 2 coverage. So stay tuned for that.
Do I have to be Ringo? I don't. Who's Ringo in the band?
No, you don't have to be. You could be Paul.
I could be
Paul Atreides.
Oh man, I'm trying to do my Paul McCartney accent now. I don't know about that, David.
Oh, there you go. Not too bad.
Was that all right? Was that all right,
okay.
Paul McCartney?
It was close. Work it. You can work it a little bit.
I'm from Liverpool. All right.
Jamie.
What's that?
I was thinking Jamie from Ted Lasso.
Oh no, that's Mancurian, right?
Oh, that's Mancusian, right? Yeah. Or Mancurian, yeah. Anyway, okay, we're getting in trouble now. Let's wrap it out.
It's getting punchy. It's getting punchy. Stay subscribed to Properly Howard, and Alicia's feed will shift us. But also make sure you subscribe to Rings and Rituals, the Marilyn Arpukila and Sarah Brown joint coverage of the Rings of Power Season 1 and all the rituals therein. I'm super excited for it. First episode's coming out March 6th. I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm probably going to listen to it early because I can't wait.
Because you can.
And I have that privilege.
Go subscribe to the feed, please. Whatever you're doing right now, go to the show notes of the show, scroll down the bottom, look for Rings and Rituals, click on that, and subscribe now so that you can start to get those. The preview episode is out.
And we're on it.
Huh?
And we're on it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So check it out.
Cool.
All right. Should we give some shout outs?
Do the shout outs.
Discord server boosters, Opus the Machine, Gnarls, Aaron K., Tiller the Thriller, and Dork of the Ninjas. I forgot to write his name in the credits, but thank you, Dork. I haven't heard it from Michael in a while.
Michael. Let's
That's his handle.
I know, but I don't. It's fine when it's Dork of the Ninjas, but I feel weird just being like, "Hey, Dork."
Hey, Dork.
Michael, thank you.
Yes. And to our top tier subscribers, both patrons and supercasters, Samartian, Mark H., Michael G., Michelle E., David W., Brian P., Nick W., SC, Peter O.H., Bettina W., Adam S., Nancy M., Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H., Sarah L., Gareth C., Eric F., Matthew M., Sarah M., DJ Miwa, Andra B., Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T., Alex V., Aaron T., Sub-Zero, Aaron K., Dally V21, Gnarls, and the last shall be first, Adrian. Thank you all so very much for your continued support for not only for John and I, but for on behalf of our community.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm saying yes in Japanese.
Yes. Hi.
Because he learned how to say hi. He learned how to say yes in the show. I'm doing a bit here, David.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying hi back to you. I was saying yes back to you.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Hi.
Time to go.
Time to go. Good night, everyone. We'll see you next week for more Shōgun. The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by the Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.